Then in 2003, when President Khamenei said to the US in a letter, we'd like to talk about all these issues, Bush said, you're the axis of evil. So, hey, we're rebuffed. We tried. You know? That was a window. It was a window of opportunity. Won't come back. You can also put this on a map, by the way. And if you were in Iran, looking at all those American flags around you, you might feel a little bit nervous. And you may be defensive. I know I would be. Let's go to oil and gas for a second. The only thing you need to look at here are the very large circles, which are the reserves. And there are only 3 countries that really matter here: Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. What a surprise. About 30–40% produced, the rest is still to come. But if we look at the export pattern, and this is 1 million barrels a day, if you did this 20 years before this, it wouldn't look like this. Now, most of this oil is going east. Most of the oil from the Persian Gulf goes eastwards. And the same is true of the gas. In the Persian Gulf, there are only 2 gas countries, Iran and Qatar. And Qatar is the only exporter of any significant volume. Iran barely exports gas to Turkey, might start exporting gas to Pakistan in the next few years, but it doesn't have LNG technology and is unlikely to acquire it. So LNG goes eastwards and to Europe. Not a lot of energy flows from this region to the US anymore. That's the message. And you think, well, good. But no, because if China runs out of oil because the Middle East has turned the taps off, do you think the US is going to look so good? I mean, we're all independent. That's the problem. You know, China goes down, we all go down. So I'm going to look at these 3 countries in a little bit more detail, quite quickly. This is Iran. The big fields in Iran are all in the south. Gas near Qatar, oil up near Iraq. That's really all you need to know. These are the big fields in the south. The blue areas here are being produced. So what you can see is most of Iran's oil is about 50% done. Sanctions have had a bad influence on them. They cannot produce as much as they'd like. Financial sanctions have been the most effective, by far the most effective. They can't get access to letters of credit. They can't get bank finance. The only people that will help them are the Chinese. And the Chinese have provided cash, people, and expertise. And without China, Iran's oil production would probably be starting to fall. But if that investment's kept up, which I think it will be, we could see Iran doing perhaps 5 million barrels a day for quite a long time. It could do more, but it's not going to be able to. And this is the problem Iran has domestically. You know, its population rate has fallen. Its growth rate has fallen a lot, but population is still growing. But oil consumption is growing faster than the population because it's heavily subsidized. All energy is heavily subsidized in Iran. And since about 2000, there's been a growing gap between the capacity of the refineries to produce gasoline and diesel and their consumption. So they're importing a large quantity of gasoline, something like 220,000 barrels a day of gasoline, which is costing the government about $7 billion. And gasoline is sold at 33 cents a gallon. That's the US gallon, which is immensely subsidized. It costs more than that to produce it. In 2007, they said, well, this is enough's enough, we're going to raise the price. And they raised the price a little bit, and they said, we're going to have rationing. Well, the Iranians are clever people. Rationing doesn't going to work because, the cars get bought and sold between different officials. So now they're going to have a plan to stop the subsidies within 5 years. But there's enormous opposition because it's not a particularly rich country. So, you take someone's car away from them, they lost their mobility, well, you know how that feels. They are going to build refineries. They're upgrading the existing ones, but this is stymied by the US financial sanctions. And only China is stepping up to invest in refining capacity in Iran. Of course, they know this is a strategic weakness. They're not, they play chess very well. They know they have to deal with this, and they're doing what they can. But for at least another 4 or 5 years, this is a big weakness for Iran. You may know some of these people on here. I know I do. The person you probably hear most about is President Ahmadinejad, who is nicknamed in Iran Ahmadinejad, which means Mr. Stupid. But he has other names also, the chimp and so on and so forth. But the person that really matters here is not Ahmadinejad. He's a mouthpiece, but he's just that. He's a mouthpiece. The person that's in control here is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was made supreme leader in 1989 when Khomeini died. Why was he made supreme leader? Because everyone else thought, this is a weak chap, we control him, we have him under our thumb, we'll manipulate him. And Khamenei thought, well, no. So he built his own power base, completely independent, in the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. Bit of a mouthful. Pasdaran or Sepah, maybe shorter. This is a group that was created to fight the Iraqis and to defend the regime. So they're loyal. Not very big, 120,000 or so, but they're extremely loyal to the leader. These are his people, and he has close relationships with them. These are the powers of coercion. He controls that. The other key component here is a group called the Basij. Basij means in Farsi volunteers, essentially. And these were volunteers for the Iran-Iraq war to run across minefields and blow themselves up, in short. They were often volunteered by their parents for sums of money because they had lots of children. It's very sad, but that's the case. Now the Basij are used for street control. So if there's an opposition rally somewhere, Basij will arrive on motorbikes and deal with it. And Khamenei has his own son to make sure that they do what they're asked to do. So this little cartoon at the bottom here on the left is from an Iranian cartoonist, by the way. Okay, that's the powers of coercion. Every state institution has a representative of the leader in it. He controls every institution, from banks to oil companies to everything. That implies a sort of monolithic structure, but Iran isn't actually monolithic. Within the regime itself, never mind the opposition, the blue area here in this diagram are the people that oppose Khamenei, for various reasons. They include a large number of what were considered a few years ago extremely conservative clerics in Qom, as well as a chameleon, Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, who was famous for the Iran-Contra deal, which you may or may not remember. So this is what the balance looks like. It's a really top-heavy balance. The key thing here is that the regime is interested in preserving its interests. It's not a irrational bunch of fanatics. These are rational political actors who are saying, we've got all this, we want to keep it. Now, how do we keep it? We isolate ourselves. We encourage ourselves to be isolated. We want to be in conflict with our neighbors, with the United States, because this gives us our legitimacy. We tell the people, look, we're being attacked on all sides, we need to be defensive. This is their agenda. And whenever there's a little bit of a rapprochement, Mr. Ahmadinejad will stand up and say something provocative, because he's trying to make the situation worse, not better. The opposition, mostly middle class, is like a revolution in reverse, isn't it? You have the middle class trying to revolt and the lower class trying to stop them. Not enough critical mass, I would say, without some of the lower classes joining. Iraq. Iraq has been a story so far of two oil fields, Kirkuk and Rumaila. Kirkuk in the north, discovered in 1927, and Rumaila in the south. 90% of Iraq's production has come from just those two fields. Iraq is the most untouched piece of geography for oil on the planet. It has large numbers of extremely large oil fields, practically undeveloped. It is the future of world oil production.